That goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills, because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win.
3, 2, 1.
However difficult life may seem, there is always something you can do and succeed at.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to The Right Opinion, the home of a twat with too much free time.
Try to make sense of what you see, and wonder about what makes the universe exist.
The struggle and the progress. The times we were told that we can't. The people who pressed on with that, yes we can.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to The Right Opinion, the home of a twat with too much free time. I'm in a transitional period with my content, and I hoped that I would have something else ready today. However, that has been delayed as I underestimated how much work that would actually take. So today I provide you with an alternative video, a theory that was fluttering around in my mind, and even if it's not entirely applicable by the time it's released, I hope you take something away from it. There is one certainty with YouTube, and any media outlet at that there will always be news, whether it's a rap feud, a boxing match, or a dead body. There is no escaping it, and we as viewers want to know what's going on, but we also want to cut the crap and have the information that matters fed to us. We're busy people, we have lives. When looking for ways to have this information planted into our minds, we may turn towards news channels like Drama Alert or Scarce. On the other hand, we might look for more thoughtful responses such as that found in Colossal is Crazy or The Random Shark. Now both of these styles have advantages and disadvantages, the news providing us information fairly immediately but also depriving us with many additional thoughts and insights, and although these thoughts may be found in more introspective content, they're often released towards or even after the end of a topic's shelf life. So to provide a compromise between the instantaneous nature of news channels and the narrative of informational content, we turn to commentary, more specifically, trending topics, which provide the core information that our brains so desperately craved, while still providing an opinionated narrative that could give audiences reflection to feed off. It takes both components and packages them nicely. Emerging out of the ashes of the old reaction genre, Pyrocynical was one of the first to lead the charge, gradually leaving behind gameplay footage for more personal interactions with his viewers, often conversing about stuff that was trending and providing his opinions. This wasn't a huge shift from his old content, it was just a bit more focused on occurrences that appealed due to its momentous popularity rather than its absurdity. As this gradually grew in size, Pyrocynical found contemporaries by his side in many forms. One of the main channels, ImAllexx, who rose to fame in part thanks to Pyro's shoutout. He is joined by a slew of smaller channels who formed what is known as the commentary community. These players have formed a little lineup that goes around, covers trending topics, and occasionally collaborates to keep the growth constant. This is understandable, but nothing lasts forever. In a way, there are many unique facets to the commentary community that makes it successful, but there are other drawbacks that also render these creators fragile. As a friend and even collaborator to many, I have had the experience of spectating the good and bad. Often these portraits paint a character study of many individuals and their contribution to something that is a lot more technical than people give it credit for. So to begin with, let's talk about what goes on behind the scenes. One of the unsung heroes to the drastic rise of many channels is something known as the algorithm. The algorithm is sparingly thrown around, but should not be underestimated. There are many individual tactics that can be spotted if you go on many of these channels, particularly in the tags and description. What does this mean? Well, let's take an example. You search The Right Opinion net neutrality, you will see 4 results, but only 2 of them have net neutrality in the title. So how do the algorithms manage to work out that these videos were about net neutrality? Well, you see, in my description and my tags, I have net neutrality. neutrality, and because at the time net neutrality was about to be repealed, my video But It Was Fine Before did actually better than the others, even the ones with net neutrality in the title. The commentary community, and particularly those who cover trending topics, thrived on this dynamic. If you click on 90% of commentary community videos, you'll see lines of very intricate tags, some even with specific styles. For example, this one mimics the instant results that you see in the search bar. Or you could take a Tozy's video on Logan Paul, that despite being released considerably after a lot of creators, fell into favour with the algorithm, possibly because its description reflected fellow creator Kavos's very closely. Now, description and tags aren't specifically unique to the commentary community, but there is a uniqueness within their meticulousness. Now, why is this the case? Well, one person has a specific style towards the algorithms that seems to be successful, and because we're a community, they have friends. Let's say they share it with their friend, who shares it with their friend and their friends, and so on, until it's basically common knowledge. And at that point, people double down on their tactics, and you have to be a part of it, or else the possibility of missing out on views hovers over your head. These algorithms aren't particularly groundbreaking on principle, however there are many side effects for why creators view them as important. One of them was the concept of blowing up, which contrary to its literal interpretations meant a severe spike in growth through a strong flow of new subscribers, bolstered by YouTube's promotion of your content. When using description and tags correctly, the algorithm supposedly allowed a knock-on effect that would give the channel momentum, and thus give your content publicity in a cyclical way in which viewers would come and motivate YouTube to promote that content, and YouTube promoting that content would subsequently cause the viewers to come. In effect, is why ImAllexx with Pyro and Kavos working with Drama Alert may not have brought in a huge amount of immediate subscribers, but created a collateral effect that brought them thousands of additional fans and followers over the weeks after. Creating links between all your videos and giving them relevance in certain searches and topics that YouTube identified was particularly beneficial when it came your time to shine, and YouTube couldn't be keener to feed off that momentum. Now, as I noted earlier, this became a competitive market, with people trying to continue this momentum through uploading content at a constant rate and not letting their channel, quote, die. On concept, this doesn't sound like a bad idea, but once the floodgates were open, there was no stopping it. Now, the algorithm seemed to like more trending topic commentators at first. As certain characters emerged, there was this nature to create algorithms that fed off themselves. They no longer had to rely on subgenres. Whereas a year ago, people were creating content on topics that often leaned into other persuasions, such as a skeptic community. Now the commentary community was emerging. They could choose who they decided, who they made famous. We want to make Zoella a big deal? We can. We want to make Onision a big deal? Sure, go for it. If you were looking through a window, the commentary community for a brief few months seemed self-sufficient. There was a new power harness thanks to these connections harbored by some very ingenious marketing. But there was still a dependence that actually made the community rather fragile. Although commentary had partly established itself, it remained on life support. That life support being larger YouTubers who were the individual targets of the commentary community on many occasions. Tana Mongo, Onision, Zoella, KSI, the Paul brothers, the list goes on. Whereas other communities had zeroed in on their own appeal, the commentary community could only feed off other people's. After all, that's what commentary is. But there are plenty of other communities that feed off larger issues. Look at the skeptic community, for example. What happens when they run out of people to feed off? Well, they turn on themselves sometimes, because the skeptic community thrives on a difference of opinion, and not one that I personally like, and I'll expand on that in the future, but nonetheless, ideological differences are inherently easy to make content about, and when differences seem less likely, they can be manufactured. Even remnants of the FIFA community managed to revive their career by forging a feud. The commentary community has this appearance that it only goes after bad people, the scammers, the liars, the manipulators, the people who film corpses, and therefore it doesn't often turn on itself. None of the commentators are inherently evil as such. On the surface, many of them just seem like normal human beings who have stumbled online. That's not to say that drama within the community doesn't happen at all. ImAllexx's two most popular videos involve his nemesis Kavos, and Pyrocynical's old video on Keemstar harbored more views than any Drama Alert video released, bar Dollar in the Woods, the timeless classic. But setting aside the two antagonistic figures that I have listed, many of the members in the community have seemingly dodged criticism due to, quote, moral principles. And anyone who has attempted to make comprehensive videos on other more grounded figures have been pretty harshly hit by the fan bases, even when the points themselves have been perfectly valid. Take Wooly One's video, for example. Why is this an issue? Well, let's talk about the morality complex. You know the sort of distaste you feel when you go after a quote good person? Many come across and say, well, he's just doing what he's doing, there's no point criticizing him, just leave them be, they're not hurting anyone, they're good people really. They may be the best person to exist, but if you feel their content is inadequate, then you are completely in your right to speak up. Nonetheless, even if the points are valid, if it's someone you like, it can be hard to watch, and that is understandable. But it also could be crippling to the notion of improvement if you do decide to refrain from criticism. When you go after a person who is perceived as nice or well-liked, you'll see illogical comments like the ones shown on screen, where people are trying to articulate that gut objection but end up either just calling him a hypocrite or some other slur, despite the fact that they cannot justify nor qualify their arguments. Another popular attack is somehow that because these channels are in the same genre, they have no grounds to attack each other, as if there is no spectrum of quality at all, or the classic, they have more subscribers than you, so you're just doing this for views argument, which is just unbelievably hilarious considering the commentary is built on making content about people with more subscribers than yourself. How has this morality complex arisen then? Many of these YouTubers take the courtesy of delivering damning criticism in a way that condemns actions of people who may be behaving immorally. The reason that ImAllexx's video / response to Kavos on Philip DeFranco's Patreon was more well received than the original was that in spite of the unsubstantiated assumptions in both videos, Alex simply executed his comments in a way that seemed more believable and impartial. He levied the respect that people have for him to his advantage. And given the fact that a lot of these commentators often go after people conducting bad actions or just behaving terribly, people feel hesitant to call them out if they make mistakes, as they feel that in doing it, they'd be thrown into the corner of defending someone like Logan Paul, and let's face it, no one wants to do that. And mistakes can be very damaging, particularly if an audience believes them. Even the plethora of videos on Kavos only typically complain about his behavior or demeanor, or a few videos where he goes after more ambiguous characters. People don't generally want to say, well here, this is what they got wrong about Logan Paul, because it's Logan Paul, and they're going against the moral right. People often allow their own judgment of character to prevent them from criticizing the content that they may be watching. You hate Tana Mongo? You'll love this video attacking her with certain factual mistakes. The closeness of proximity of many of these YouTubers also contributes to people refraining from making content of them. Many of these creators may be afraid to alienate their own fan bases or even friends in trying to talk about a certain YouTuber. Even larger YouTubers have this apprehension. In essence, by having a community, many of the largest creators have the power to monopolize a narrative. These creators being so transcendent to the drama has essentially done two things. One, made people feel bad when they want to criticize them, and two, create a culture where the fans seem to defend regardless of how bad the criticisms are. The vitriol can be pretty strong. In my opinion, that's not healthy, because even from the most derivative video, they might still take something away from it. If you're a nice person, it does not mean your content is equally as nice. At this point, some may say, well, why don't they just resolve it in private? Ignoring the fact that a lot of larger YouTubers are more inaccessible, and that obviously criticism videos can be done just for the notion of entertaining an audience, they often have a unique effect on the creator within the realization that content does have value. Among the shit that I've shown on screen, there were also multiple comments on Wooly's video about people pretending to be fans of WildSpartanz' content, but still agreeing with the points that he makes. These comments were equally or even more plentiful than the negative ones, and probably more important. To me, these reflected an accelerated sentiment that was going to arise on his content regardless, but one that people just couldn't pin down at the time. Critiques can be important, not just for outlining your weaknesses, but your strengths, and should help paint a clearer image of yourself, perceived by your own and other viewers. This was a mild tangent, but an important one, because it has not always been that way. From the grounds that the new commentary community sprouted from, there was a lot of drama. It was easier to do it back then because there wasn't a standard in a lot of what people did. The content was more easygoing, you could just be reacting to whatever crazy video existed on YouTube that survived on its own terms. However, since the new community has erupted, conduct has become a staple. However, due to the staple, other staples have been deserted. A community that thrives on drama has trouble creating any drama of its own. One of the only people who has been completely untouched through this drought is Pyrocynical, and that's in part because his persona has its own appeal, something that many commentators can lack. In addition to that, the fact that he has a widely established fanbase over eras of content has granted him the mobility to cover whatever he wants. And that is fine, as long as drama's happening somewhere else. What happens when it dries up? What happens when the only people creating any alternative narrative are either quitting or gone? What do you do when you have centered your channel around current topics and algorithmic appeal? Due to the monopolization of narratives, the smaller channels often cover the same sorts of topics that the larger channels cover, and once the larger channels ran dry, so did a lot of other people. Certain ideas in the community are not fashionable anymore. People have limited themselves in the content that they make. No one wants to upset anyone. Even in the last year, the scope has narrowed. People that had content made on them a year ago that are still around to this day have seemingly been forgotten about. That's fine for a civilized society, but the simple truth is that people want to watch a train wreck. Now, normally that would be okay too. They could just make some content and weather the storm, but for the first time in a long time, there's real competition. Reaction is a new type of commentary that has taken the algorithms tidily, pivoting around the very cunning bait-and-switch raw footage thumbnail and reaction commentary that follows. It is headed by Triggered Tro, with channels like Benji and Just Destiny on the coattails. It most often focuses on reacting to TV footage of peculiar people. Though there are some variants, it originated as mostly Dr. Phil reactions, but now seems to be gradually branching out, particularly with the explosive success of another YouTuber, AidenProjects. Now, they've been growing at a decent rate for a few months. Don't count this as something that has happened overnight, but for the first time in the last couple weeks, they've had complete advantage over the competing genres of YouTube. The commentators identified this, but in a brief moment of panic, instead of considering the genre that they were a part of, trending topic commentators favored individualism and switched over to this content in an attempt to stay afloat. But it mostly failed. Why? Why did it fail? Well, a few reasons. Firstly, in narrowing their content over the months prior, they had subsequently narrowed their channel's appeal, and therefore when attempting to branch out, many of the fanbase were disinterested, and if that core fanbase doesn't turn out, then it's very hard to build up the momentum favourable with the aforementioned algorithm that they value so much. Algorithms aren't just based on topic alone. Although the content that these creators make do share some common ingredients with reaction, the fanbase of such is assumably more mature than the persuasion of many of the reaction channels. For example, reaction channel Benji recently did a poll of his audience on Twitter, and although obviously there are methodological flaws with such a poll, I would still expect it to be somewhat reasonable representation, and well, the results speak for themselves. Another huge reason is that the personality of hosts do not suit them. Whereas reaction channels were energetic and relied on some form of comedy, trending topics never fully leaned on the comedy. They relied on the opinion of their host and the trust that they obtained from the audience. Comedy was just an enhancement to them. It was never a necessity. Therefore, the fanbase they accumulated was much more on this basis of reason rather than just instant humor. Instead of railing against this content that their position always seemed above, they tried to get on board with it, essentially killing off any possibility of them criticizing it in the future without looking like huge hypocrites. And make no mistake, I'm not saying that reaction will kill off trending topics, not even the YouTubers. Trending topics will always exist, but the brand of commentary responding to it is fragile, and what they've done is hem themselves in. Why would the same audience that watches these people who deride Lele Pons and her contemporaries as not funny want to see them partake in humor equally as juvenile? AidenProjects' transition from commentary to reaction only worked because of his core fanbase, mostly from Keemstar, wanted it. This may have been possible a year ago when the subjects these channels covered were broader and more diverse, but the appeal has appeared to converge in the months prior. Now obviously, when specific topics are trending, this can be to their advantage, as the algorithm recognizes a noticeable amount of content and views, and thus rewards it with more views, hence subscribers, such as the Onision situation, in which videos on Onision were garnering more views than actual Onision videos. However, this also does create subscribers who are there for the topic over the commentator, and once that dried up, it was hard for these YouTubers to mix up their content without disengaging a significant proportion of subscribers. I often look in the related channels as an indicator of what sort of fan base these people have, and you might notice the related channels of these reaction commentaries are significantly different to the trending topic commentators. I'm not saying that proves anything, but it is food for thought. In this new wave of reaction commentary, trending topic commentators found content that was similar enough to compete with them in the commentary subgenre, but not close enough for them to assimilate to and retain a compelling view count. For better and for worse, there is a different audience for a lot of these commentators, and even if the topics themselves weren't bad on premise, the expectation of humor that the genre has, due to channels like Triggered Tro and such setting it up, has essentially given it a brand of what people expect. So even if these trending topic commentators made reaction style videos their own, people probably won't give it the click they need, because they already had that expectation. To summarize, they were kind of finished before they'd even started. But what does this all mean in the grand scheme of things? We put out a lot of points, but how do we tie them together in a neat bow? Well, my friends, let's give it a try. Throughout the last year, content has been discovered that hinges partly on the power of algorithms. The use of meticulous description and tags has enabled many trending topic commentators to cover areas that gives them traction with many fan bases. However, the problem with relying on algorithms alone is that if you fall out of favor with them, then you're screwed. Many of these creators recognize this and try to add some personality. However, most of it ended up being overshadowed by the notion of moral righteousness that simultaneously shielded them from criticism of content a lot of the time and held them out of drama they may have had the opportunity to involve themselves in the past, unless it was a clear wrongdoing. Otherwise, people only seem to enjoy pointing out hypocrisy and inadequate content when it was signaled by larger people outside the community, mainly because of the unification of the smaller community and the domination of certain narratives, to the point that going against these narratives, or the YouTubers that make them, could be seen as blasphemous. In the last few months, the trending topics became very focused and directed at a few people. This is also okay providing these people continue to appeal to the public. However, with the escalation at the peak of the Logan Paul drama, there was an eventual inertia that people stopped watching. In the past, even when the topics weren't trending, the lack of other options for commentary content would encourage the viewer to check out a trending topic commentator anyway, even if the subject itself wasn't particularly riveting. However, when the new challenger entered the ring, it perplexed the commentators into trying to integrate their channels into it. This did not work, as much akin to a KFC opening next to a McDonald's. Although you may face competition, the appeal isn't identical. If you can't see what I'm saying here, commentary is not a tale of death, it is a tale of survival. And unfortunately, when you're surviving and even thriving, you don't think of all the factors that's keeping your channel alive. You only realize it when it's gone or something's wrong. Trending topics are propped up on multiple other conditions, often beyond their control, and when these conditions withdraw at once, the effect is felt by many. This drought will probably pass and we'll return to the oasis of trending topics in the future. Maybe by this time the video's out, we'll be past it all and living it up. But this was a warning, and I've watched friends and people I admire put their lives and careers on the line to pursue the YouTube dream, and the simple truth is that some may not cut it. Times are changing, content is changing, you have to remember what brought people to your channel and what's going to keep them there, and even if you can keep them there. From the get-go, commentary channels were stuck between the rock of news channels and the hard place of informational content, and when the walls close in, the pressure shows. The commentary rat race, promoted by algorithms and topics, has driven people insane, trying to keep the news coming even when there isn't any. And when they ran out of targets, they ran out of ammunition, creating a dependency and a fear of channel death. No death is certain and no death is immediate, but a run of careless decisions and algorithmic exploitation has led us here. How you respond is your own destiny from here on. Maybe it will right itself, maybe we will have to change. Whatever it does, I hope it succeeds. There are many prices paid within failure. I'm The Right Opinion, and I'll see you in the next one.